Hello.
Hey, man, is this Matthew?
Yes, it is.
What do you like to go by? You like to go Matthew or Matt?
Psychotropic presents Matt.
This is actually the very first time I've ever been interviewed. I grew up in Ferndale, Washington. I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, and I've spent all 36 years of my life here. I'm kind of just your average Joe. I was working your standard 7 to 3:30 construction job, making 15, 16 bucks an hour. And I got sick and tired of life, so I had purchased an ambulance off of Craigslist, and I turned it into a motorhome and decided that I was going to go live in it for a little while and just experience life. And here on the May 26th, it will be my 6-year anniversary of living here in my wonderful ambulance. I was sick of my job. I was not paid what I was worth. I was getting called a lot of bad names, and I just really didn't want to work there anymore. So I actually got fired for a bunch of just wild reasons, and I was able to collect unemployment. So I was collecting unemployment, looking for work for the first couple of years in my ambulance life, and that's how I was maintaining what I was doing. One of my best friends had actually bought the ambulance before me, and so we did a bunch of work on the inside. We took out all the seats, we put in a new stereo, and we turned it into a party wagon. And then when it came into my possession, I tore out the cabinets, put in hardwood floors, did some engine work, changed the tires, and just got it a little ready so that I could live in it and not try and travel around the country in it.
Where was the first place you went?
I was just here in Bellingham. I just puttered around. My buddy took it to Oregon a couple times, but I never really wanted to take it very far, just in case something blew up and happened to the mechanical part of it. I didn't want to be stranded out somewhere and not know how to get home. It's from 1978, so you never know when the radiator hose is gonna blow or some transmission gaskets gonna start leaking or whatever. It's actually quite cramped. You really learn just how resourceful you are and how ingenious you are on coming up with little ways to do this and store that. And okay, I don't have a bathroom in here, so I got to be very attentive as to what I eat, when I eat it, and all that good stuff. You definitely find where the porta potties at the construction sites are at, and where the 24-hour bathrooms are at, because you can find grocery stores or gas stations that have them. It's definitely opened my eyes to those people who are considerably less fortunate than me and don't have an ambulance to live in and don't have whatnot, because at the end of the night, I have a dry, safe place to sleep at night, and not everybody else can say that. I play a handful of video games. I have Super Nintendo and regular Nintendo in here. I live in the driveway of one of my friend's house, so I poke my head in and use the kitchen and shower and bathroom and stuff. And he play video games on there every once in a while. Grand Theft Auto, this game called Fortnite. I'm mediocre. I can get a couple kills. My buddies, they're really good. They're really good. I work in restaurants. I work construction jobs right now. I just picked up a job working at a landscaping company, so I do a bunch of basic labor jobs whenever I can, and I also have a book published, and I make a little bit of money off of that. I also make a little bit of cash here and there writing natal horoscopes and astrology reports for people, just sitting in coffee shops, talking to random people. I don't consider myself an adult, and I really don't ever want to be a complete adult. I don't want to be a stingy old cuss bitching and pissing and moaning at everybody for having their fun. When I was a little kid, we used to have a neighbor, and he would not pass out Halloween candy, and he would yell at us when if we hit our wiffle ball or kickball into his backyard. So one Halloween, he didn't give us candy, so we took all his lawn furniture and climbed up into the 30-foot tree and hung his lawn furniture from the 30-foot tree. So I don't want kids doing that to me, because I didn't pass out any Halloween candy. After living in it for about a year and a half, I picked up an astrology book, trying to learn how to fish better. I wanted to know how the salmon migrated to different phases of the moon cycle. And I picked up this just a random book at the local library, and it touched me so spiritually that I just wanted more, and I wanted more, and I wanted more. And then eventually it got to the point where I was predicting people's future with it. Like, I would go up to one of my best friends and say, hey, you're going to get in a car crash on this day. Hey, you're going to get in a fist fight on this day. Hey, your wife's going to get pregnant within this few months span. And after 5 or 6 months of doing that, I developed a good passion for it. So I started writing down all my astrology stuff and eventually published a book last January. It's called The Circus in My Head, A Madman's Path to Astrology. It's basically for the beginning greenest beginner who doesn't know anything about astrology and wants to become an intermediately knowledgeable astrologer. And you can just pick up the book. It's turned out to be about 410 pages long. The first 100 pages of it are about my dysfunctional life and the less fortunate background that I was raised in, and how you can learn to read your chart. There's a whole bunch of weird signs and symbols you got to learn, but once you can get past that, it's really, really interesting. I was raised in a Christian church. I did all that confirmation, baptism stuff, but once I kind of got out of my own, I've always questioned the church. I don't like being told how to think or really what to do. I kind of separated myself in my early 20s and whatnot, but then once I started reading astrology, because I knew so much about the Bible, I was actually able to correlate different passages in the Bible with the astrology. Now I can read the Bible and I know what words to look for, certain phrases, certain passages that have all referred to astrology. Most people don't know this, but the Bible references the moon 68 times, and most of those references are positive. It kind of solidifies my belief in the practice of astrology. It gives me a sense of, okay, thousands of years ago when the great Jesus Christ was walking the earth, he was practicing astrology. He talks about the sun and the moon and the stars. There are multiple references in the Old Testament and the New Testament about the sun and the moon and the stars, and it gave me a great sense of I don't know what personal fulfillment is the best thing I can say, because it gave me some sort of structure to base my belief system on. Now when some Christian comes up to me and says, your astrology stuff is garbage, how can you believe in that? I say, well, I actually just read my Bible. Here, let me show you these passages. Oh, really? That passage is a bunch of crap. Oh, really? Here, let me show you this other one. Okay, you want to see when Jesus is talking about the stars and the tribulation? Here you go. Here's that passage. And it really opens their eyes to say, oh, I've been taught that astrology is bad. I've been taught by its witchcraft, but wow, Jesus was actually an astrology practicing Jew. Before I studied astrology, I was very, very astute in reading my Bible. I had actually read the entire thing 3 times through and had read most of the more important stuff significantly more than that. So now I have memories of, okay, this said this said this said this. So now I go looking for it. I read the Old Testament. I intentionally look for moon phase signs, maybe ceremonies that were correlated with the full moon, seasons that were correlated with the moons and the suns and stuff like that. Astrology's taught me a lot. Like, if you go and pick up the Farmer's Almanac, it's all planet alignments. It's all Jupiter this, Saturn this, moonrise, moonset, sunrise, sunset. And there's definitely a direct correlation between when you want to plant, when you want to clone, when you want to prune for growth, when you want to prune for decreased growth. And I would say out of everything astrology's taught me, gardening is actually the most. You give plants a certain type of fertilizer during certain moon phase. Give them a different type of blooming fertilizer during other moon phases, and different crops react differently to different cycles. Some need more sun, some need less sun, some need certain temperature to germinate, and it's actually a lot of fun applying all of what I know about astrology to the plants that I grow.
Okay.
And they're not marijuana plants. They're not marijuana plants. I'll make that certain right now. I was raised in a rather broken home. I never really had much family around. It was really just me, my mom, and my little sister. So it was just a real struggle growing up in poverty. Mom working 2 jobs. We really didn't have much. We always had food on our table and a roof over our head, but sometimes that was about it. Home life was actually really good. My mother was a very straight-laced Christian woman who made sure we were sitting in Sunday school class every Sunday. The house was clean. She didn't drink. She didn't smoke. She didn't do any drugs. She made really sure that us kids had as much as she was able to give us. We didn't have any grandpas. We didn't have any aunts or uncles. We didn't have anybody around us. It was just me, my mother, and my sister. I had a couple friends who lived out in the country, so I would go out there and we'd run around, in their horse fields and their cow pastures, blowing up, cow pies with firecrackers. I played a lot of video games. I was really an isolated kid. I wasn't part of the cool crowd. I kind of kept to myself and then played my video games and stuff. Only hung out with a select 2 or 3 or 4 type people. My father was a drug addict who took off on us when I was about 11. He was just a normal hardworking guy working at the aluminum smelter plant here in town. When I was about 7 or 8 years old is when he got into cocaine pretty bad. And then after a few years of spending all the family's money, my mom had to divorce him, and him and his brothers and dad moved to Wyoming to go chase down some work. And I don't really know what his life was like much over there, but we maintained a little bit of written contact for a little while, and we saw each other a few times between the years. But he eventually passed. He committed suicide. I think he hung himself when I was about 20.
When you think of cocaine, can you describe how you feel about it?
Well, I've never tried it, so I really don't know what it's like to be high on it. But I actually think that cocaine should be legal, and they should use it in dentist office and use it for painkillers and stuff, like for topical painkillers instead of Novocaine or lidocaine or any other stuff like that. And if you want to get a little toot of coke and get high for the night, by all means, get a little toot of coke and get high for the night. I don't care. You don't negatively afflict me yet. I have a first-hand experience of the negative side of cocaine. I've seen what happens when you get into it too much and let it take over your life. And drug addictions are nasty. My dad wasn't the only person to ever have a drug addiction. I've had a few of my friends go through that, and a few people that I weren't really friends with go through that. So I've seen more of the negative side than the positive side. So that's been able to keep me away from it. I've eaten a whole bunch of magic mushrooms in my life. I absolutely love them, and I think they should be legal. I was 18 the first time I had tried magic mushrooms, and I had just heard a few things about them. You know, oh, you see funny things, you see weird things, you feel weird. So we were at a party one night, and some of my buddies had some of that taste, so we boiled up some tea and started frying on mushrooms. It was really, really cool. I was in a really safe place with people that I was comfortable with, so I really didn't have a bad trip. I was just sitting in rooms, and the lights and shadows were just so amazing. I would look at a lava lamp and just stare into it for 25 minutes, or I would look at just the light reflecting off of a car hood and see a whole bunch of different shapes in it, or stare into a bush and watch the rustling leaves change shapes and stuff like that. There was the excitement of anticipation of, okay, what's this going to do? What's this going to do? Am I going to see a bunch of pink flying elephants like in Dumbo? Oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And it was really just kind of a euphoric body high where I just felt really, really, really good, and all the colors and light were just amazingly interesting. It was one of those, this was a lot of fun the first time. You know, maybe I try it again the second time and see what happens then. So since then, I've probably eaten mushrooms about maybe a dozen or so times. I usually weigh out. The most I've ever eaten for one trip was 11.5 grams, and it usually takes maybe 3 for me to feel a decent buzz. The actual highest, most intense trip I ever had is when I had 9.5 grams, and I ground them up in a coffee bean grinder, and I just made a powder out of them, and I just chowed down the whole powder, you know, chased with a bottle of water, and I was up and down and passed out in 4 hours, which doesn't happen when you eat mushrooms. It really, really doesn't. That experience was actually kind of scary because I was out in downtown Ferndale living in my ambulance, and I had eaten the mushrooms and then decided I was going to go out to the bar. I lasted about 15 minutes in the bar, and I went back to my ambulance, locked all the doors, made sure they were roped shut so nothing could open them, and then I just curled up in the fetal position with my headphones in my ears and watched the kaleidoscope and roller coaster for 3 hours. I was listening to just a hodgepodge of Metallica and U2 and Rage Against the Machine and even classical stuff from like Nutcracker or Beethoven symphonies. It was actually quite a wide array of music. The coolest song I heard when I was on that trip was actually a classical version of the song Sanitarium by Metallica. It's played by a band called Apocalyptica, and it is absolutely amazing. A lot of times you go on really, really good trips, and you really, really don't remember in intricate detail what happened. Like there was one time me and my buddy ate a whole bunch the night before Thanksgiving, and I don't remember this, but apparently we had our trip, and I went to bed, and he was sleeping on my couch, and he heard me screaming and yelling in my bedroom. So he opened the door to see what was wrong, and I was jumping up and down on my bed with a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man doll, screaming and yelling at something. He couldn't really make out what I was screaming and yelling about, and Lord knows I don't know what I was screaming and yelling about. He said he got a couple names of people we knew that he said I was talking to, and I didn't really remember any of it. But when I woke up in the morning, I was definitely feeling some kind of a hangover type, not nauseous alcohol hangover, but my mind had definitely been blown, and my muscles in my face weren't working. I couldn't even eat a bowl of cereal without all the milk dripping out of the sides of my mouth. So that was just a really weird experience as well.
Do you prefer to trip alone or with others?
No. Tripping alone is actually a bad idea because that's when you start having the isolative and bad thoughts. What you really want to do is be in a small group of people you really, really trust. I just like hanging out and watching animated movies. Animated movies are really, really cool. And just listening to music and stuff like that. I would say my first trip ever was more of a body high than the visuals. It wasn't until maybe about trips number 5 or 6 when I started eating larger quantities that I started getting more visuals. And I never got any visuals of seeing stuff that wasn't there. I would just see something and think it was something else. Like I would look at a bush and see a duck wearing a headdress riding a water buffalo, just walking, and that's what I would see. And then I would look at a different bush, and I would see something else. And then I would look at a cloud, and you would see something else. And it's not like, the green gazoo was coming down to talk to me, but it'd be pretty cool if he did. There's a lot of thoughts you have about the universe and your existence and where you are in this little, speck of dust that we call Earth. And a lot of that, I believe, has to do with the religious background that you're raised in. And because I was raised in a church, I had more thoughts about angels and demons and the spiritual side as opposed to somebody else who really doesn't have much of a spirituality for themselves. I think mushrooms can be used as an antidepressant. I know that it's one of those weird things. Hey, how could it be? But psilocybin in small doses makes you feel amazing, as long as you don't overdo it and start seeing the pink elephants and whatnot. The first hour or so of a good trip, you're just absolutely euphoric. Everything feels good. All your problems seem to go away, and even the ones that you do have aren't as bad. It's given me a sense of openness to the universe. Like, your brain is just in such an altered state of consciousness. It's really, really difficult to explain. But you see things in your head that are just philosophies. Like, you see circles and patterns of life. Okay, this leads to this. This leads to this. This leads to this. And you're just more aware of the nature around you. You're more aware of the birds chirping. You're more aware of which way the grass is blowing and, what the rain smells like and stuff. It somewhat opens up your sense of meaninglessness. You realize how small you are and how big everything else is. That's really what mushrooms did to me.
Do you think that you've learned anything from taking mushrooms that you wouldn't know otherwise?
Not really. Not really. I think they've more just opened my mind to what I already know. I actually think space aliens are going to invade before I die, and we're going to have to face a wild war. I believe in space aliens 100%, and I think there's been a lot of evidence that's been covered up and red taped, and the government says, look over here, we don't want you to see what's going on. And one of the biggest, it's not my conspiracy, it's been around for a while, but we landed on the moon in 1969, and that'll be 50 years next year, and we've only been back 4 or 5 times. it boggles my mind that we've sent more space rovers to land on Mars, that's however many hundreds of millions of miles away, compared to our moon that's only 250,000 miles away. And I believe that's because there is alien races on there already developing bunkers and bases and kind of like a space hub for intergalactic travel. I actually think they're going to try and blow up the moon because of how it will affect our tide cycles. That'll put everything out of whack. We'll start having wild earthquakes, all sorts of stuff like that. I think that'll be their first step, and then they'll see how we react to that, and then they'll go start attacking at the weakest point. There's a cool little report you can read that I don't know how true or fictitious it is, but it made a lot of good points if it's true. It's called the Blue Planet Project, and it was a supposed diary of one or two of the scientists that helped develop Area 51. They were involved in the Roswell crash, along with the other ones that had occurred right around the same time that nobody really knows about. But it is a 120-some-odd page document telling you about different space aliens, when they got here on Earth. It gives a chain of command as to who's in charge, who's not in charge, who knows what, and the path of information. It was a really, really interesting read, and if you can find it, it's definitely worth flipping through.
Having taken mushrooms, have you dabbled in other things?
Just smoking weed, and I actually had an OxyContin and painkiller habit for a couple years back in my mid-20s that I kind of kicked, and I really just stay away from stuff like that. I try to stick with the all natural. If God didn't make it, I don't take it. I was living in an apartment complex, and I started hanging out with this neighbor guy who was able to get OxyContin and methadone. So every once in a while, I'd buy a couple pills, and I would just crush them up and powder them and put them on my bowl of weed and just get really, really high for a while. Then one day after a couple years, I wasn't doing it every day, but it was like maybe 1 or 2 pills a week. And after a weekend of being kind of strung out, I was laying there in my bed, and I decided, this is just enough. I don't want to do this anymore, and I really haven't touched them since.
Can you describe why you chose to not touch them?
It's because it made me so lazy. Like, I would go to try and play softball, and the people would ask me what's wrong. I'd have no energy. I'd have no desire to do anything. I would just lay there in my bed doing a bunch of nothing. And I just got tired of doing a bunch of nothing in one weekend, and I said, this is enough. I don't want to do this anymore. I was seeing where that road was going, and it was kind of expensive, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I stopped.
What did you find yourself doing after you were done?
Just playing video games and smoking weed.
Did the weed give you more energy?
Sometimes I have too much energy, and I need the weed to calm me down.
So when you think about drug addiction, how did you justify using pills, considering that those are highly addictive too?
I didn't justify anything. I just said I'm going to go do what I want to go do, and I want to get high right now. So that's what I went and did.
Considering your father's drug use and what ended up happening to him, one might actually assume that you would be vehemently against substance use. You're not, though. Can you describe that?
No, I'm not, because I think we can make a lot of money by embracing it. And if we embrace it, that opens up people's minds to it, saying, okay, if we're not shunning it and we have it right in our face, we can identify what problems are there. And part of the reason people do it is because it's illegal. They get a special kind of high because they're breaking the law while they're doing it. And I think that if it was legal, then some people would say, okay, I don't need to do it until I'm 21, and then they start trying it when they're 21, and then, either it is or isn't for them. Another thing I'll add to the legalization is that people would become a lot more educated about it. We had this stupid little DARE program that we went through that was kind of forced upon us in the 6th grade, and it introduced us to drugs. It's like, oh, hey, there's this stuff called pot that I could smoke and get high. Or, there's this stuff called, acid and cocaine that does this and this and this and this. And as a 6th grader, that actually intrigued my interest more as to, okay, what happens when I try this? And if people were more open about it, saying, okay, yeah, you can try this. You can try alcohol. You can try weed. You can try coke. Just wait till you're 21.
Cocaine kind of pulled your family apart,
yeah.
At least regarding your mom and your father.
Yeah.
Other families would potentially experience that too. Do you think that would be worth it? Would it even increase?
Well, I think along with the open-mindedness towards the drug usage would be the recovery from it. Because it would be just like alcohol. People would get into it. They'd say, oh, this is really fun for 2 or 3 years, and then they'd stop. Then they'd have to be in the recovery part of the drug. And then more parents would be talking to their kids about drugs, saying, hey, these are at the stores, and maybe the doctors. Maybe a kid goes into the doctor's office and asks them, what's this heroin stuff? What's this cocaine stuff? And the doctor says, well, this does this, this does that, and this is why we use this. Maybe if they were took drug usage from a more intellectual point than from a more, hey, I just want to do it to get high type stuff.
I see. Yeah, for sure, man.
And once again, I'd like to reiterate, a lot of people do it simply because they were told not to. Lord knows how many times I did something simply because my mom and dad told me not to.
I actually want to start astrology classes. I'm a very talented woodworker, so I'm kind of gonna, split stuff doing that, do my woodworking on the side, and hold astrology classes, sell my book. I have a couple more books that I'd like to write in my day. I think it would be really cool to take a piece of crap, rundown house, and do all the interior remodeling myself. I know how to do tile work, cabinetry. I've been doing construction for a while, so.
What's the significance about repairing a house and then?
It is a lot of fun to take something crappy and do the work yourself. It's a lot more personally gratifying to get done with a difficult project and say, yeah, I did that, I built that, and I didn't pay somebody to do it. It was all my work and me.
If you had any advice for somebody who's wanting to dabble in some substance, what would you give them?
Start off slow at first. Start off slow at first, and make sure you are in a safe, comfortable place when you do so. Don't try and go different places during your trip. Get some movies, get some music, get some video games, and just stay in one general area.
What advice would you give somebody for just going through life?
I don't really know. I would say, how's that phrase? Be excellent to each other and party on. I suppose that would be my advice. Don't take life too seriously, and then the sooner you can get over the petty shit, the better you're gonna be.